I'll tell you what I think Americans are sick of. Joe Biden, uncommon nonsense that comes out of the Democratic Party. And they're sick of feeling like this country has been running in place, stuck in quicksand for the last 4 years. But there are hints of optimism in the American people. There was a CBS News survey that more Americans thought that Donald Trump would increase peace and stability in the world than that he would not. So you can start to feel the green shoots of optimism.
Yes, you can, Scott Jennings, the all-star of the CNN media team, in my opinion. And welcome to Monday on the Chris Plant Show. It's Mike Opelka in for the vacationing Chris Plant on this 30th day of January, the second to the last day of... I keep saying January. Thank you, Michael. I'm trying to get to January 20th. I keep trying to push us forward to January 20th. It's December. Yes, it's December 30th. Second to last day of the year, and we are rapidly approaching the inauguration of Donald John Trump, although the left is still out there trying to find a way to mess with Mr. Trump's inauguration. And they're going to try a couple of things. You know they are. It's coming. It's absolutely coming. We are marking the passing of President Jimmy Carter as he passed yesterday, surrounded by friends and family. But we're also pointing out some of the insanity on the left. What the heck am I talking about? There are those on the left who just can't deal with this. The fact that Donald Trump is going to become president, and they are posting all over social media how great it's going to be, that the flags will be at half staff when Donald Trump will be sworn in. Yeah, that's kind of how that works. The president of the United States, at least on paper, Joe Biden is still the president of the United States, has said that we will have a period of mourning at the loss of Jimmy Carter's life, and there will be a tribute, a ceremony to honor him in D.C. on January 9th, and the flags will immediately be lowered to honor Jimmy Carter and his service to this country for 30 days, which means that they're going to remain there until Donald Trump is sworn in. And I cannot believe the left is just digging this. They're all happy about it. They're over the moon about it. Seriously. I'm serious. They're actually excited about this. Do you really think that's going to matter? It's not going to change anything. Donald Trump will be president. And speaking of Donald Trump, this came out this morning. Donald Trump posting on Truth Social. We are the party of common sense, a primary reason that we won in a landslide the magnificent and historic presidential election of 2024, all 7 swing states, 312 electoral college votes, the popular vote by millions of voters, despite large-scale voter fraud taking place in numerous states, including California, where votes are ridiculously still being counted or under review. All won with ease, calm, and professionalism. Republicans are being praised for having run a legendary campaign. That's true. That's true. There are Democrats out there saying that even Van Jones has said this. Mr. Trump continues. Democrats are being excoriated for their effort, having wasted $2.5 billion. That is true as well. Lindy Lee, one of the big fundraisers for the Democrats, has even left the party. And there are rumors that she may end up in D.C. at the inauguration in a VIP spot because maybe she's changing teams. But about that $2.5 billion, Mr. Trump goes on to say, much of it unaccounted for, with some of it being used to illegally buy endorsements. $11 million to Beyonce, who never even sang a song. $2 million to Oprah for doing next to nothing. $500 million to, I'm not going to use the word Reverend, Al Sharpton, a professional con man and instigator who agreed to, quote, interview their star-spangled candidates, Kamala and Joe. Trump adds, we ran a flawless campaign, having spent far less with lots of money left over They ran a very expensive sinking ship, embracing DOJ, FBI weaponization against their political opponent, me. But it didn't work. It was a disaster. Let's not blow this great opportunity which we have been given. And that's in all caps. I think this is important. Donald Trump is saying, let's not blow this great opportunity which we have been given. The American people need immediate relief from all of the destructive policies of the last administration. Speaker Mike Johnson is a good, hardworking, religious man. He will do the right thing, and we will continue to win. And then he closes this statement, which came out today. Mike has my complete and total endorsement. MAGA. With triple exclamation points. So while the left is trying to figure out how to make things troublesome for Donald Trump, either officially by trying to pull some sort of 14th Amendment shenanigans, or trying to drive a wedge between Donald Trump and Elon Musk, or Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, or any of the people on Trump's cabinet, and you know they're trying every way they can. Mr. Trump is out there speaking about unity. Donald Trump is out there telling his Republican Party, and let's make no bones about it, this is Donald Trump's Republican Party. Don't blow it. So he's given a complete and total endorsement to Speaker Johnson, and we'll see what happens, because I guess that's going to happen Friday. We will deal with that on Friday. I mentioned that in the wrap-up to the year, we're looking at the media malpractice. And some of the stuff that we heard on mainstream media throughout the year, throughout the campaign, it's just unbelievable, especially when you look back and you go, hold on a second, did they not know? So our buddies over at Gravian put together the top 10 media malpractice moments of the year, and we're sharing them with you. This one deals with the fear-mongering, especially as it relates to Project 2025, which I talked about earlier. The mothership of the Chris Plant Show is based in Washington, D.C., and you're seeing on these billboards by the bike chargers, the electric bike chargers, these billboards that are talking to, and they have a cartoon of Trump, and he's holding a copy of Project 2025, and there's a red circle and a line through Trump because they're trying to keep that out of D.C., as they're saying. And the mayor says she knows nothing about this. Well, then they should be removed. But the Project 2025 and the fear-mongering was all over the mainstream media this year.
Far-right manifesto puts forth sealing the border, and it seeks to do so with military force. It aims to use every lever of government to find, detain, and deport undocumented people, take funding and housing away from people who are just associated with undocumented immigrants. Quote, deny loan assistance to those who are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents.
Well, that's interesting that there would be outrage about that when we've seen the debanking of conservatives. We've seen companies that support legal rights like the Second Amendment having a hard time because they've been debanked. And if you're really worried about the military getting involved, Tom Homan said over the weekend, be prepared for the U.S. military to play a role in the mass deportation. Just throwing that out there. And while we're talking about this kind of bad misinformation, disinformation, the left side of the mainstream media coming in at number 6 with how they talked about Twitter X and misinformation and disinformation.
After Elon Musk took over in 2022, most of its fact checkers were fired. Now the site is rife with trash talk and lies.
Wait a minute. I've been on Twitter since 2009, and I can tell you there was trash talk and lives going on Twitter starting way back then. So it's nothing new, Leslie Stahl. You're not telling the truth here.
Little would you know that this, said to be footage from Gaza, is really from a video game. Eventually, X users added a warning label. These are AI-generated images of, well, see for yourself. Did your research find that there was more misinformation spread by conservatives?
Absolutely.
X has turned into a haven for the spread of misinformation. Since buying the site almost 2 years ago, Musk's site has struggled to control it on topics ranging from the election to the assassination attempt against Trump.
Number 5.
A free space that actually has people comparing notes and saying, hey, this isn't right. This isn't right. And speaking of number 5, one of the craziest things that we saw during the campaign was how Kamala's choice for Vice President, Tim Walz, a.k.a. Tampon Tim, Kamala's choice for Vice President was just made out to be the greatest, the most normal guy in the world, while J.D. Vance, a guy who served honorably in the military, we know Tim Walz lied about his service and his rank. J.D. Vance was absolutely trashed by the mainstream media. Again, number 5.
Midwestern dad, like super clean cut vibe.
Everybody likes
right?
Tim Walz.
So plain spoken and relatable.
Pretty moderate Democrat.
Very moderate record.
A new moderate.
He's right down the middle.
He's not just an old white man.
Tim Walz beats America. You know,
talks like a regular person.
Tim Walz is the opposite of weird.
Populist approach to fear on the Republican side, and the happy populism that Tim Walz is on the ticket on the Democratic side.
Happy warriors. Happy warriors. He was certainly the happy warrior last night.
happy warrior, folksy backstory.
Wicked sense of humor. Look how happy the pig looks. That's good.
And then there's
And J.D. Vance is weird, extreme, and angry.
Utter humorlessness. It's hard to believe that J.D. Vance could be any more extreme.
It's like a freak show of bros.
Dark and ugly beneath the dignity of most politicians.
J.V. Vance.
Yeah, Miko liked to call him J.V. Vance. And then she had to do some groveling down at Mar-a-Lago. There's still 4 more great clips highlighting the media malpractice of this past year, and it truly is shameful what the people who pass as journalists are trying to pass off as journalism. Let me grab one more Jimmy Carter remembrance here. Eric is in Tennessee calling Chris Plant Show. Hello, Eric.
Hey, good morning, man. Thanks for taking my call, man. Excellent segment.
Thank
you.
Hey,
real quick, back in the day, my father was a brand new Mustang Lieutenant JG stationed at Bureau of Medicine and Surgery down there at the National Observatory right across from Department of State. And my mom was from Louisiana, so when President Carter won the election, she went crazy. I mean, she loved Jimmy Carter, Georgia. She's from the South. He's from the South. Yada, yada. So one January 20th, freezing cold day. I just remember it being like Alaska cold day, if not, northern Canada cold day.
Okay.
Here comes a family of 4. We were probably somewhere between what's considered Freedom Plaza now and the Treasury standing there. I just remember a wrought iron fence and a lot of ivy and plants behind us. But here come the caissons from the old guard, and they're ahead of the parade. And if I'm not mistaken, at least he walked half of the parade route, but if not the whole entire parade route from the inauguration, him and First Lady Rosalind Carter, and they come bebopping down, and they're waving to people, and it's kind of a sparse crowd towards the end there, and bebopping, and my mom's going nuts. Here's a family of 4, the only kid in the Washington, D.C. metro area wearing a Cowboys coat from Sears and Roebuck. Right, you see how this goes, right? So we're, going crazy and stuff, and, my mom was, and we're waving and everything. He cocked his head, and, waved to my late mother, may she rest in peace. But she was, that wasn't the first incident with the, not just President Carter, but with the Carter administration. I'm a kid growing up in the D.C. area and went to, D.C. area schools, so there's a very cosmopolitan demographic that goes to the public schools in that area. And I remember one of my friends, his name was, if I pronounce it correctly, Mehran, and his family was from Iran. And one day he didn't show up at school. The entire family was gone. And that was sometime around when the hostages were taken. And my old man was attending a graduate school at GW, and I'd met one of his friends there. His name was Mohammed, and he was an F-4 pilot for the previous, under the Shah, Iranian Air Force. So he was gone. And, my dad never heard from him again. We never heard from anybody again. So this is going on. And then I transfer schools. The next thing I know, I'm going to elementary school, 5th grade, with one of the kids, and I'm not going to name his name. I can't off air. His father was a hostage. And he came to speak, I think in 1981, after they were all released and stuff, came to speak at the elementary school.
Wow.
So I saw both sides of it, if you will. I do remember making coffee when their mom's waiting in line for the gas and running it through the backyard, through the parking lot to the gas station, making coffee and pots of coffee and running back, and she would pass it out to the ladies and stuff. So I think, as a humanitarian, obviously President Carter, now the late President Carter, may he rest in peace, was a great person. Like all things considered. But
Eric, I'm up against the clock. I thank you for the stories. The most important thing you said was about D.C. If you hang around long enough, you're going to see both sides. And you did. As a 6-year-old, you saw Jimmy and Rosalind Carter walk the inaugural parade. It freaked some people out that year. Freaked out Secret Service bigly. All right, taking a break. It's Mike Opelka in for Chris Plant on The Chris Plant Show.
Chris here with a list of things that none of us should trust. The Washington Post, the New York Times, anything on CNN. Here's a list of things that I do trust. The Washington Times. Support real journalism for just $1 a week at washingtontimes.com/Chris.
It is the Chris Plant Show. Mike Opelka in for my friend Chris Plant. And we're just thinking back as we're remembering Jimmy Carter today. I remember Kamala Harris talking about Jimmy Carter when she was running for president.
So, look, if Jimmy Carter can vote early, you can too.
I don't know why the cackling was required there. Laughing about Jimmy Carter when he was wheeled in to vote and he was in such bad health. It was a scary, pitiful picture. It almost looked like elder abuse, but that apparently is nothing new in the Democrat Party with Joe Biden's history as well. It's just kind of weird. If Jimmy Carter can vote early, you can too. I swear to God, I don't think Jimmy Carter was capable of moving his hands at that time. Very bizarre moment. There was some breaking news. The federal appeals court today, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, handed down a ruling in Donald Trump's efforts to appeal the verdict of E. Jean Carroll in that defamation and sexual abuse civil suit. And to put it in the most succinct terms, they said no. No, there will be no overturning of the ruling, at least by the Second Circuit. I got to see what's next. Does this go to the Supremes next? 21 days before Donald Trump is sworn in? No, they said. Welcome back to the Chris Plant Show. Mike Opelka with you. It is the 30th of December. Last Monday of 2024. Trying to get to everything. There's so much going on. And yes, the passing of Jimmy Carter and the endless tributes to Jimmy Carter and the endless memories of how difficult life was under President Carter, especially if you were an American hostage in Tehran. 444 days Americans were held by the Iranians until Ronald Reagan was sworn in. Then they decided, we better send these guys home. And they did. But it was tough times economically here. And then the Reagan Revolution began. But we'll talk more about that because I also want to cover the journalistic malpractice of this past year. Boy, there were a lot of them. A lot related to both the election, or just what the mainstream media was doing in trying to sway the election. And I'm talking about swaying it away from Donald Trump. It wasn't so much that they were talking about all the great things that Americans were experiencing under Joe Biden, because those were few and far between, but they were intent on telling you just how terrible things were going to be if Donald Trump were elected, all the terrible things that were going to happen. And this is from our friend Tom Elliott and his top 10 list of things the media completely got wrong in 2024. Number 4.
Think about what happens if all of our access to health care goes away next Tuesday. The stakes literally are life and death for every woman in America. It's not hyperbole. It's not an exaggeration.
Trump will fulfill his promise to be a dictator on day one.
Sets up a network of camps.
Extraordinarily erratic foreign policy in the Middle East.
Doing profound and possibly permanent damage to American democracy.
If historians in the future are allowed to write books, and by the way, that question is open this morning, and if people are allowed to go on television and say what they think in the future, which again, that question is open this morning. That's what happens when strong men come to power. That happened in Italy in the 1920s and 1930s, Germany in the 1930s. Suspend the Constitution, pit the Justice Department, the Defense Department against political enemies, and run this country out of the White House.
Yeah, that's the panic that the left was trying to sow from their perch in the mainstream media, especially at the very beginning there. Remember when the Dobbs decision happened, and we were told, we were warned by everybody on the left, especially in the media, there will be no more abortions. It's just going to be impossible for anyone to get an abortion. And here we are well after the Dobbs decision, and based on an actual news story. More abortions in the last year than ever. More common than before the Dobbs decision. So they got that one really wrong. Really wrong. And then when we get down to the top 3, this is kind of like a real battle for the top 3 media malpractice moments of 2024. What could they be? What were they? And coming in at number 3 is how the media carried forth the lie. And you got to believe they couldn't have been on board with all of this, could they? Number 3, Joe Biden's not going to pardon his son.
Presidential promise to put the law before family.
The president has ruled out pardoning his son.
Pledging not to pardon his son.
To sit there and say, well, I'm not going to intervene in the legal process, and I wouldn't pardon my son. Democrats and Joe Biden protecting the justice system.
Our current president of the United States has so much respect for the law that he has said he would not pardon his son.
And Joe Biden has very clearly said he would not pardon his son. He would not commute his sentence. How can Republicans keep making this argument now that Joe Biden has really put it out there?
He's not doing it because he is living what it means to have a rule of law in this country. Yeah. And it isn't, I mean, if you want to know if he believes it, you could actually see what is happening with his own son.
Really interesting. You can actually see Joe Biden and how he feels about the rule of law with what he's doing with his own son.
Own son. Even President Biden saying in a statement that he would respect the outcome of this case.
This was a good day for the system, good day for sort of America as an example of how the rule of law should work.
We're coming on the air this hour with breaking news. President Biden has just pardoned his son Hunter.
Whoopsie. Whoopsie. After all that, after weeks and weeks and weeks of Joe Biden's, no, we're going to respect the process. Not only did he pardon him, but that 2014 to present. And now, as more and more is being revealed about Vice President Biden's relationships with Hunter's business partners, the photos on the cover of the New York Post, I guess the Washington Post, they were probably too busy to get those pictures out there. Yeah. You wonder why that pardon happened. The second most egregious journalistic malpractice moment happened during the Kamala Harris campaign. And this is really interesting because she was only campaigning for 107 days. And what we saw in terms of a media narrative, because if you go back to 2023, if we go back to October of 2023, Kamala Harris was the lowest rated vice president in American history. In 2023, she was absolutely at the bottom of the barrel, lowest rated vice president in American history. Unbelievable. Then you fast forward and they had to get Joe out of there, and suddenly Kamala needed help. She sat down with 60 Minutes. She sat down with a couple of major interviews after they finally accused her of ducking so much that she couldn't do anything. But the media partners were complicit. They edited her answers. Do a little A-B comparison here. The original question and answer, and then the edited answer. It really is something that borders on criminal. Coming in at number 2 on the Grabian top 10 of media malpractice moments in 2024.
When we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother raised my sister and me. She worked very hard. She was able to finally save up enough money to buy our first house when I was a teenager. I grew up in a community of hardworking people, you know, construction workers and nurses and teachers. And I try to explain to some people who may not have had the same experience, you know, but a lot of people will relate to this. You know, I grew up in a neighborhood of folks who were very proud of their lawn.
So that moment spawned 1,000 quotes of, I grew up as a middle-class kid. And that's how she really answered it. But when it appeared ultimately in the broadcast,
you know,
when we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
So when I talk about building an opportunity economy, it is very much with the mind of investing in the ambitions and aspirations and the incredible work ethic of the American people.
But it's so that moment, David Muir and ABC News editing in an answer, which was still pretty much a word salad, is also just a massive violation of the trust that is supposed to happen between the people and the mainstream media. But ABC News was not alone.
People.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems...
So that was Bill Whitaker in 60 Minutes interviewing Kamala Harris and her circular statement there. That's what really happened. And then 60 Minutes aired this.
That Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
When we talk, so just complete journalistic malpractice and not just misleading, possibly even criminally misleading. I think the networks are starting to pay a little bit of a price when it comes to advertising revenue, as we have seen in the case of MSNBC and Democrats. 72% of them have said they're taking a break from mainstream media. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe it's because you can't trust the thing they say. But the biggest insult to the American people is still to come. And we'll talk about it before we get out of here today. I want to make sure we jump in and maybe grab another call here. Mark is calling from Independence, Missouri. Mark, welcome to the Chris Plant Show.
First of all, those were stunning. I've heard those before, but the mainstream media, I don't see how they aren't dying, and it appears they are with podcasts and everything else kind of coming in and taking over. But it's just pathetic. And Michael Beschloss is a disgrace. He's not an historian. He's a leftist hack and a little bit crazy, actually. But anyway, my point is, Harry Truman said that anyone who gets rich in politics is a crook, and that would include LBJ, Clinton, Obama, and Biden, but would not include Jimmy Carter. Now, I agree. He had a disastrous presidency, but, he lived in the same home, I believe, throughout his life and lived in Georgia and did not get rich off the White House. And so that's something to his credit, being a Democrat. That's a rarity. And his presidency was troubled, but he got the idea. He wasn't like those other guys either who were always manipulating and, lying and trying to deceive the American people. He was sincere, but he was just clueless in many ways. And so it was a disastrous presidency, but he was a decent guy, and he didn't get rich off the presidency, like I say, which is a compliment. And he actually did bring about some deregulation, which helped the economy. So,
we talked about the deregulation, especially in the airline and railroad industries, and that was a help. But you're right, Mark, and this is one of the things to remember. Jimmy Carter was president for 4 years, and it wasn't a great 4 years. But he was a human being after that. He was a post-president after that for decades. And in those decades, the things that he did based on Habitat for Humanity, the Sunday school teaching, the example he showed as a father and a husband and a church leader, I think are to be honored. And while we don't have to pay a lot of attention to his presidency, we certainly can tip our caps to the man that Jimmy Carter was after he left office. And you never heard a bad thing about the guy after he left office. And I think that's an excellent testament to who the man was. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you being there. I do have this number one clip I want to get to, the number one journalistic abuse. And just I want to follow up what Mark said about all the people getting rich with a clip from the Joe Rogan podcast when he was talking with Rod Blagojevich. Yes, Blago made an appearance. And they were talking about the one and only Nancy Pelosi. At least I think they were.
Nancy Pelosi in the House. Okay?
So, I support her stock trades.
I didn't know about any of those.
Did you go to Pelosi Stock Tracker?
No.
You ever seen it? Oh, it's so good.
You're kidding.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
No kidding.
I'm not really a stock market person. I don't pay attention. But I do know people that are very invested in the stock market. And Pelosi Stock Tracker is legit. Like, you could find out what she's buying, and you should buy it.
That is really, really interesting.
Yes. She finished 2023 up 65%. Warren Buffett was up 31.6% in the same year. She outperformed the Standard & Poor's Index by 92%. And some estimate her profits in the $28 million mark. Yeah, that quote about politicians who are poor are probably I'm paraphrasing the Harry Truman quote, the politicians who get rich, likely doing something on the fringes. Anyone that gets rich is a crook. Jimmy Carter was not. He did not get rich in politics. I'm taking a break. When we come back, we'll see if there's another call here that we have to pick up in terms of Jimmy Carter and the number one journalistic malpractice moment of the year. And they all seem to have their hands on this one. It's Opelka in for Plant on the Chris Plant Show. It is the Chris Plant Show on this Monday, December 30th. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. We'll get together tomorrow if you will join me. I appreciate it. It's Mike Opelka. You can only see the stories I'm looking at pureopelka.com. Just a place I post the things that catch my attention every day. Before I get to the number one media malpractice moment, let's try and get one more call in here. Let's go to Kevin on line 8 in Tom's Brook, Virginia. Hello, Kevin. You have a thought to share here?
I do. I think it was yesterday, the day before, and I can't remember who it was talking about it, about the press passes that these, and I use this term lightly, journalists have with the White House.
Yeah.
Now, I would take it a step further because you look at just the View. They're up to, 5 legal notices they've had to read. You got Stephanopoulos getting hit with $15 million plus some fees. I think it's time to start pulling FCC licenses for, like when I was in the military, we call it dereliction of duty.
Well, I think you're going to see some of that, Kevin. I know that you're going to see a total revamping of the White House press pool in terms of who gets to ask questions, who's in the front row. I definitely believe that's going to change. So stay tuned on that. As far as the dereliction of duty of the media, yeah, it's on display. We've been talking about it all day here. And in fact, I'm going to get to number one, but that's an excellent point. The FCC does have some power to regulate some of these licenses, and we'll see what happens. But thank you for that, Kevin. Excellent point. And coming in at number one on Tom Elliott's Grabian list of the media malpractice moments of 2024, I think you know it might have something to do with Joe's brain. Yeah.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. This version of Biden is the best Biden ever.
She knows so long as she was 9.
In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
President Biden has a photographic memory.
But he's totally focused. He's very sharp.
They say he's sharp in meetings and so on.
Very lucid, very well informed.
He's older. That doesn't mean that he is unfit.
He can clear a dementia bar, and that's probably a win.
More wild speculation from a bunch of people who have probably never been in a room with Joe Biden and certainly don't have medical degrees that I'm aware of.
But a huge part of the Mueller report talks about Russian disinformation tactics. And one of the themes this election cycle is that Joe Biden is too old to lead. And so everyone is seizing upon this. And it is a classic disinformation tactic.
Yeah, classic disinformation tactic. That was then. This was yesterday on Face the Nation.
That would be, to me, Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline that became undeniable in the televised debate.
At the presidential debate with Donald Trump.
Unquestioned. And, it's starting to emerge now that his advisors kind of managed his limitations. It's been reported in the Wall Street Journal for 4 years, and yet he insisted that he could still run for president. We should have much more forcefully questioned whether he was fit for office for another 4 years.
Yeah, you should have. But you didn't. So no one should ever trust you again. All right, thanks for being here. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, all the callers. Till tomorrow, a New Year's Eve celebration. It's Mike Opelka reminding you, testudo, my friends, testudo.